Amendment by Huberty.
Chair recognizes Mr. Huberty to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, in going back and looking at the bill, one of the experiences that I had last legislative session, I think many of you know, and Representative Bernal and King and I all had, is we worked on the School Finance Commission, and many of us have gone through interim studies and joint commissions that have never produced anything. And I think through the leadership that we had, certainly with the members, Chairman Taylor and Mr. Brister and Mr. Williams, other members of that commission, came up with some very good recommendations in adopting that through our school finance plan this session. So what this amendment does is it actually takes out, reduces membership from the House from 5 to 4 and the Senate from 5 to 4. We have also, as Representative Murr had done, is that he took an amendment from Mr. Lucio, added 2 advisory members from each.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr.
Rodriguez,
Bernal,
I'm sorry, not at this time. Let me just finish real quick. For Mr. Rodriguez, they had advisory members are non-voting, but we added 3 members from the governor's office, because I think it's important that we have to have the governor in this conversation. Obviously, he gets to call balls and strikes at the end of the day, and I think the governor needs to have appointees associated with this as we continue going along. And again, I think this is very important. The governor, the lieutenant governor, and the speaker worked very hard this session by stating that they were trying to provide meaningful tax relief and reform through our tax swap that we were trying to accomplish, and spent a lot of time talking about that. We didn't get there, and so this is not too dissimilar to where we ended last legislative session, where we tried to work on a school finance plan and went to work on a commission. And I think we need to open this up and leave it to the members and other public members to have this input in this process to talk about what do we want our tax policy to be. So I think it's important to be able to do this. And Mr. Speaker, this time I'll yield.
All right. Chairman Huberty.
You need to be recognized.
Gentleman yields. Sorry, Mr. Bernal. Gentleman yields, Mr.
Chairman Huberty. At the end of the last session, we ended up with a school finance commission. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And in being honest, speaking only for myself, I wasn't too happy about that.
Nor was Representative King or I.
That's right. And yet, could you talk about how we felt about that process at the end of the School Finance Commission?
Yeah, I think where we went into it originally is that we all got together and said, geez, we're going to have to write a minority report, because we weren't sure where it was going to land. But at the end, we had a unanimous bipartisan report that came out that was very unique, changing the entirety of the system. But it was a working group. It met on over 25 times, hundreds of hours. So the expectation is, if we're going to do this, is it the same way that we need to do it.
Is it safe to say that HB 3 was the product of that commission?
100%.
And is your expectation that we will produce a similar kind of product at the end of this process?
Absolutely.
And can you explain to me how this amendment and Chairman Martinez-Fisher's amendment work together?
Sure, because what we're talking about is our taxpayers are expecting us to reduce the maintenance and operation tax. And by the way, members, we did pass tax relief in House Bill 3. That was the mechanism that we provided tax relief, and all taxpayers across the state of Texas, whether you have a home or a business, and owners are going to see meaningful property tax relief to that degree. So that's very important. And I think it's important to note that, we again tried to work really hard this session, but we recognize that sometimes doing those hard things becomes difficult. And so this is another mechanism, but as Representative Murr has offered up a solution that says, look, we need to start, and you know this, Mr. Bernal, right now we're still at $1, but we think we'll get to 94 cents. But we're at $1 tax rate for Tier 1. What we're saying is, let's start at 0, and where do we land in between, based upon trying to figure out our flawed tax system here in the state of Texas. And the best way to do that is to work together and collaboratively to do that.
It's safe to say that this requires the same time and effort as school finance did.
That's right. And again, I think it's incumbent upon us to look at the leadership that's been provided by the governor, the speaker, and lieutenant governor through this session, and taking those hard steps to lead us to a correct tax policy. And this is the next step for us to be able to do that. And so with that, Mr. Speaker, I believe this amendment is acceptable to the author.